Yeah, I'm gonna get right into it. So again, our brother Hans Cherry, he had to leave for time constraints. So, but I definitely wanted to introduce you to my other panelists who have been long dear friends of mine for 30 years, I would say. Yeah, for about 30 years. Who both were. We all kind of grew up in this house culture together and saw all kind of its evolution and everything else. So first I want to talk about my sister next to me by the name of Tina Howe. Her bio reads, Tina M. Howe is the truth. That she is. Her love affair with music began at a young age. She was introduced to the house culture by her mom, who was friends with Frankie Knuckles. In the late 80s, early 90s, Tina worked at a few of the legendary clubs in Chicago's house scene, including the Reactor and the legendary Powerhouse. In 24 years, she wore many hats: poet, monologuist for Literary Explosions Weekly Poetry Night from 1993 to 1999, performer, vocalist, songwriter. She has played with some of the best talent in the city of Chicago and around the world. She is an in-demand session vocalist who has contributed her vocal talents to the background and to the foreground, as well as vocal arrangements for various projects in the genres of rock, funk, hip-hop, house, jazz, and blues. Everybody, this is Tina Howe. And down on the end down there is my brother Todd McCurry, who goes under the name Scientific. Todd grew up in the city. He loves the big cities. Everything about Todd is urban, and he embraces how growing up in a city like Chicago has impacted him. His character, his perspective, the way he creates, and the canvas he uses to illustrate. His journey with house music and the lifestyle associated with began in 1984 officially when he attended his first party. Entering the lifestyle as a dancer and a style bum, whatever that means, he grew up to become popular amongst peers and is currently producing the music that made us fall in love with being house. That is Scientific Todd on the end right there. I want to start saying, because I still have Kirk Townsend here, and the reason why Hans Cherry was on the panel before he had to left is because as far as this panel goes, talking about social clubs and dance culture and things of that nature, for many of us and for me, it started off when I was going to parties that was created by Kirk Townsend at Mendel High School. And I was in a various dance club, and Hans was actually in one of the first original dance clubs called the Rude Boys. And I was in a group called Passion, and we used to battle each other. We used to kill it. He's not here to dispute it. He snuck out the back door because he didn't want to hear the truth. Anyway, but so with that, carrying on, because at those days, testing 1 2, we're talking like 1982, 83, 84, 85. And, the term house didn't start coming into fruition until around 84, 85. So at that time, they were calling us preppy. A lot of that came from Herb Kent's Punk Out Hour and Hot Mix 5 and different things that was going on. And house being created kind of through this middle class idea, with everybody kind of wearing the boat shoes and the Levi's and the Zodiacs and the different things. And so there was a certain look and style that eventually went to it. And with that, we just started kind of forming our own kind of like crews. Somewhere along down the line, there became this divide, if you will. House at some point was all over Chicago, on the airwaves in some form, be it underground, be it overground. But then there was all this kind of, what word I use? I guess as a division amongst the underground versus the overground, amongst the people who partied at the Music Box versus the people who, the young kids who partied at Mendel and partied at the Bismarck and things of that nature. So it was kind of when I first happened upon the Music Box, it was like, whoa for me, because I was young as hell and I shouldn't have been in there. But because I had uncles who were DJs throughout the 70s and I had older siblings, I was able to get in and act like I was supposed to be somewhere. But it wasn't until I happened on people like them that I felt like I found my tribe. So when I was at the music box, I felt like I was in a space that was older, and it was, believe me, it was banging, but I wasn't at home. So it wasn't until I kind of met a Tina, a Todd, and stuff like that. And so I want to talk more about social clubs as home. Todd was involved with one of the, on the house scene, one of the best house crews called the Ambassadors from the West Side, which was some of our rivals as well too. And but Todd, you were a part of the Ambassadors, you was a part of the Acid Heads, you were part of even the creation of Them There, which was a hip hop crew. Can you talk even about, because from my understanding, especially like with the Acid Heads, it wasn't just like a dance crew, that was actually a culture and even like religion behind that. So can you speak a little about how that formed into a dance crew and how the lifestyles all around that, like how it all came?
Which one, with the Ambassadors or the Acid Heads?
Oh yeah. Well, let's start with the Ambassador, because I mean the Ambassadors, many of y'all, I don't know if you did, even branded yourselves like a fraternity. Right. They actually had a brand where they branded their arms with the symbol, which made it more of like a fraternity. Yeah. So yeah, talk a little bit about that dynamic and why that came to be.
It was interesting. It seemed like our crews back then, like Eraser said, it became like gangs in a sense by that time. But with the Ambassadors, just to kind of put it in a nutshell, during those years when they were created, I went to Memphis, Tennessee, with my god brother Kevin James and Randy James. Make a long story short, we spent some time there, and while we were there, School Days was out and all of this. This was like way after I had gotten exposed to house music, but I think we were like sophomores in high school or something like that. But I saw a lot of what the Alphas was doing and the Qs and all of that, and the whole thing with the Army boots, it just kind of did something to us, so we came back to Chicago, that September, and I think October had went past, and I was already partying, and I got all my cousins partying, all my homeboys, and we were all B-boys, and we were going to the parties. We came up with the Ambassadors because we actually wanted to go back into the grammar schools and talk to the kids about not doing the stuff that we were doing and some positive stuff, and at the same time go to parties. So we came up with this, and we went to school, and the first people that I approached personally and directly was Corey, Ishmael, and Zero, and Meg. And if I'm correct, it was Corey and it was Zero. We were on Kedzie by Adams and stuff when I told them about the organization. And basically, we all at Marshall. Marshall is a house-ass high school. Y'all in, let's go to the party. And that's pretty much, how it started. There was just no way around it. There was so many house people just at that school from, Terrence Head, he was in high school, but he hung out with Ron Hardy. We had a lot of people at that school. It wound up dissipating, after a while because there was some internal conflict, That's
anytime Corey is involved, I can believe that.
Yeah, it wound up dissipating. I think we felt like, the three of us that kind of created the Ambassadors, and this was the truth, we felt like that the crew had become, to be honest, even though we was kind of house, it became a little bit too house, and during those years, we wasn't comfortable with certain stuff, and so the crew kind of split up, and we split up respectfully. And I give credit to Zero, to Ishmael, to Corey. Those are the dudes that actually made the Ambassadors what it became. Now, in regards to that, we started a crew that was called Upsilon Phi Sigma. We was like, we've got the Ambassadors, we started Upsilon Phi Sigma, so we all branded our legs with the Upsilon. We went to school. And I think there was one day everybody was like, ooh, and they went home, Zero of them, they came back and they had what became the Ambassador symbol, but to us it was, Delta, but it became the official Ambassador symbol. And that's pretty much, where the brands came from and how the Ambassadors gotten started, and Ambassadors pretty much continued on to build the name for themselves, joining families with like ecstasy became Exodore, but what wound up happening, we came up with another crew called the Acid Heads. And the acid actually who came up with that? My guy 3D and another brother. Neither one of them are no longer around. I'm clueless where they at. They was just said we should start a crew and call it Acid. And the thing was, well, what do it mean? During those years, we were all Muslim. We were all Muslim and we were all hip hop, so we kind of came up with Asiatic children and Shmelite descent. And we use acid because we all love tracks. We all love disco, but my generation and where we's from, the tracks and the drum machines, probably because of the hip hop, we gravitated to that. We love tracks, we loved acid house and stuff, and that's what we did. That was the birth of the Acid Heads. And the ambassadors continue to live on and become a strong force.
Wow, okay. A lot of people outside of the house culture didn't know that all these organizations existed that ended up being like, fraternities, if you will.
Can I make sure I input one thing? What we were doing, and objectively what I was doing, even when I came up with the ambassadors, we was just mimicking the Alley Cats, and we were mimicking Front Row. We was mimicking Emergency and all of the college prep crews and the crews that later graduated that became like, the kings and queens of the music, with the fashion, the dance, the style that was Front Row. That's what we were trying to do.
Shout out to Keith Parker and Keith Green from Front Row.
Yep.
I want to ask Tina because I want to give a female perspective in this because these crews were a pretty male-dominated thing, and house culture at some point was a very male-dominated. The dance floor was very male-dominated, and there's not much voice talking about the female perspective within the house and within the dance culture, within the club culture. Tina and I were in a crew called Gaucho together. And we used to act a damn fool.
We had a ball. we had a ball. It was a stone groove. I tell you that.
Well, I mean, by this time we're talking the Reactor, we're talking the Powerhouse, we're talking the Reactor those days, and this is the time where hip hop is kind of starting to be formed as a culture, if you will, and house had done its thing, had been its thing, and a lot of people who were not a part of the culture were coming still to house parties because it was still the livest party you can go to. And a lot of the reasons too was they were coming for the women. And in doing so, there used to be this backlash between brothers like me and Todd, who were house culture, who was recognizably, they looked at us and you knew we were house just based on our appearance and everything else. And with that became the terms house fag, house ducks, all this other kind of thing, which was very derogatory things, and it was because they wanted our women. So can you just talk about like just being on the scene and just being a woman on the scene and that dynamic of not being, what's the word I'm looking for? Not being.
The only thing that pissed me off about any party back then, and I mean any party I went to, whether it was a hip hop set, any loft party, any party at someone's house or Reactor or wherever, I just didn't like niggas fighting. I'm like, oh, this pussy here and y'all fighting. God damn. I'm sorry, I don't mean to be, you know what I'm saying, but I gotta keep it 100. I gotta keep it a buck. That's the only thing that would make me mad out of anything. I've never felt less than a woman being at a party. I've mostly, although I had a crew, before I got this crew, I was never a part of any crew. So I would just bounce around to places, because in Chicago back in the day, you could do that shit. You could go everywhere, So I never felt less than a woman or anything like that. I mean, I've always been Tina. I'm a Tina-ist. I'm not a feminist, I'm a Tina-ist. I'm gonna do what I wanna do any way. Ain't nobody gonna tell me nothing. I'm going to this party, I'm going here, I'm going there, and it was always more guys at the party. So, if women wound up dancing together, it's because, maybe somebody was on the sidelines, but I've always felt that I could party no matter what, unless that silly ass fighting shit, you know.
Because that's all, I guess, what I was saying, as a woman, that you even feel safe.
I felt safer then.
Okay. So with that, did it feel like to you that at the house crew or the social clubs or all this that was formed, did it feel like your safety felt like because you were around your family? Because a lot, so like I said, my thing was coming into the party scene. I came into the party scene as a misfit from the outside world. You know what I mean? The people in school they weren't listening to what I was listening to. You know what I'm saying? They wasn't clamoring to have the tape that had the original Baby Wants to Ride on it. You know what I mean? And
Right.
with the hiss and all that in the tape.
Sure.
And so it was kind of like, and then dressing the way I dress, and coming from the hundreds and in the Rosen area, this whole kind of misfit outsider thing. And so coming into this was kind of like I found my home. Was that like the similar situation?
I found a home of people that was just like me, and it was so refreshing, because I not only listened to house, it was Tears for Fears, it was all that B96 stuff, it was industrial and techno and all of this stuff. And coming from Woodline Gardens on 62nd, 61st Cottage Grove, coming from over there in 63rd in Maryland, wasn't nobody trying to hear what I was trying, but I grew up with Donna Howe. Donna Howe was a weirdo. You know what I'm saying? She listened to everything. Corey, you know my mom. Y'all know my mama. Shout out to mama. Happy birthday, Donna.
Tina is one of the few who,
You know.
Tina's mom was friends with Frankie.
Yeah.
So
So
she didn't have
none of this shit, I never had a chance to feel any way about the party. And now around my house, thank God it was the 80s and 90s, because a lot of little black children over there listened to a lot of stuff. And not only did I get to listen to stuff we liked, I got to listen to like hardcore dope music, all of the stuff from the hip hop from, when that shit first said, like the Iced Teas and, all of that stuff, I got to know who Slick Rick was. So everybody was listening to everything, but I never gave a shit.
Well, see, the thing is, though, I think that's what
So
we need.
finding y'all was refreshing, because
Well,
I was like, oh, I could do this all the time.
Well, that's the thing about house as a culture too, was that house as a culture and house and as a genre is two different things. So for us, like, we didn't even want to call ourselves house, because we were hanging out at Medusa's with skinheads and and things of that nature, the punk scene and all of that is incorporated. And so it was not foreign to go to a club, with somebody playing, be it a Ron Hardy, be it DJ Rush or whoever, and they go from a Teddy Pendergrass disco to Nitzareb industrial to
Never
attract
mind.
that part culture.
Yeah,
You
till
can't even
never
get another
mind.
mic.
When I'll say one of the greatest memories of being on the dance floor is coming out of whatever edit Rush was doing. This is DJ Rush. This was one night at the Reactor. Coming out of whatever song he was doing, and played a disco song, and then he fucking played Smells Like Teen Spirit, and the floor lost it. Everybody lost it.
What song?
It Smells Like Teen Spirit. They lost it. And I was like, oh my God, like, everybody knows Nirvana. I can, you know what I'm saying? I can slam dance now. So it was just refreshing being around, although everybody had all their differences or whatever, we're all coming from different parts of the city. To get to these places, and this goes back to that home thing you were saying, to get to these places, and no matter what difference you got with a motherfucker, when certain shit came on, you was on the floor. And it was always wet and sweaty and all that.
Oh, at the Powerhouse, that mud,
Oh,
that floor would
yeah.
turn to mud.
Yes.
Hey,
Yeah. You ain't see the mud on the thing.
but
you know what I'm
something?
saying?
I just wanted to input this because you mentioned like the whole punk and and the goth stuff. Even though the Alley Cats was doing that stuff in like the early in the early days, but then the house it kind of transformed into like this whole high fashion thing. And that's when in 1984, 85, when I first got exposure, I got exposed to everything all at one time in regarding the house. It was the music, it was the dance, and it was the fashion. And prior to that, we was all pretty much immersed in like college prep because of radio and hip hop. And that's when Nosha mentioned the whole thing with hip hop, we cannot deny it. There was a lot of new things that was going on at the same time. MTV was the internet during those days. So, we saw all of that stuff. And meanwhile, we was creating our own and stuff. Now, by the time we got to the reactor, from what I saw, it was a transition and stuff. It was like a wave.
Because the reactor was 1990.
Yeah, 1990. Well, we had to stop wearing our expensive jabots that we was either stealing, for the most part, or swapping. And every blue moon, you might buy something. We wasn't finna wear that to the reactor or to the powerhouse because it was filthy. It was dirty as hell. We would roll our jeans up like the skinheads.
And not to mention, I mean, the many people that I saw got jumped coming through the Ickies trying to get to the powerhouse.
Right.
From, the 22nd to Cermak Rail Eye train trying to walk over.
It was a process to party, man. It was a serious process to party. CTA was our friend. Not too much anymore, but.
By the time we got to the reactor and the powerhouse days, I felt like I had found my clan or my tribe, or was a specific group of people. They were all around my age, because when I started partying, all of those people, they were either out of high school like Celeste and them, and I couldn't get in any of those parties, but for the most part, they were juniors and seniors. And by the time, I was a freshman, a lot of these cats, they were leaving. And it's like, what happened? We talked about that, for a while. And we actually see a lot of them seem like they kind of actually abandon us. We kind of get,
Well, I do remember because, I did start partying first on that older scene because of uncles that were DJs from the late 60s to the 80s and stuff like that. There was a level of snobbery that came along with not wanting to party with kids.
Right.
I remember Robert Williams said something like when Ron Hardy told him to come with him to Mendel when he was DJing at Mendel, he was like, who let out 1 million daycare centers? Like, ain't nothing but kids in it. Sort of thing. And the same thing when Ron Hardy had him come down to the Bismarck. There was a level of, I don't want to party with kids. But at the same time, if we didn't have a Kirk Townsend building a space for 3,000 kids, if we didn't have a Lil Lewis having 1,000 kids on Randolph Street lined up down Clark trying to get into Bismarck, house culture wouldn't have gone anywhere else.
How about this? It would have died if it wasn't for second generation.
Yep.
Now, I call us second generation.
Well, no, it's kind of more third generation.
No,
Justified.
We kind of more.
I think we second generation.
We're third.
So 78 to 84, we had to come from somewhere. You know what I'm saying? So they dropped that ball by 89, 90. They dropped the ball.
Well, again, with that, you have to
kept that alive.
You have to take into account, like we were talking about, in terms of the rave laws, with Daley coming into office, and Oprah coming here as an entity, the Bulls now this dynasty team that's happening, and them tourism dollars that they start bringing in, and they start focusing more on tourism than what was going on. And so they start shutting down one by one. At one time we used to be able to party at any of the hotels downtown, the Ascot Hotel, the Hotel Continental,
Diamond Court,
Navy Pier,
all that stuff. And then one by one, there was no space for us at all through all these laws. So it wasn't just people just dropped the ball. Their freedoms were being taken away from zoning laws, from, all those sort of things as well. And then not to mention, again, people are grown, people going off to college, some people got married, just this whole dynamic. And, hip hop was much more of a visible because of TV. It was another whole dynamic. So I don't think people really dropped the ball. I just think people end up not having the tools that they once had. Because you have to remember, the warehouse originally was supported by the Democratic Party. The very first party at the warehouse was a fundraiser for Adlai Stevenson, the Democratic candidate at the time. So they no longer had that machine behind them at some point. So I would never look at it as that generation dropped the ball and didn't whatever. I do feel like a lot of times that we don't continue to try to pass this legacy on, though. And keep doing it under the guise of I was there, you wasn't, I was there, you wasn't, when what we're trying to do with this mapping thing is prove that everywhere was there. Sure. There were so many venues, so many things that would happen simultaneously. It wasn't just 3 and 4 clubs that was there. So I think I kind of got off track there, but anyway.
No, I feel you stayed on track. You good at it. That history is just pouring out. And thanks for mentioning the political aspect of that too, because
I mean, you can't ignore the political aspect of it, because that's what killed, that's what killed the vibrancy of the scene. And forced us to go back underground and kind of come up with some new things. And, we start having a party more up north, and the Red Dogs and all those places, the Shelter. And
we had to blend in at other places. It wasn't our home anymore. We were now blending in with the masses.
And even now, I feel like I've often said that a lot of times now I feel like there's so much times where house exists in borrowed spaces that are not designed for what this culture is. Because people forget, just like about hip hop culture, about that being 4 elements or 5 elements of hip hop, there's also elements of house culture as well. And the fact that most of these places now don't have dance floors, that's not a part of the culture. I mean, you can't have house if you ain't got no dance floor.
Absurd. Not to have a dance
That's
floor.
what it's all about.
At least a piece of hardwood floor or something. Then a removable hardwood floor. Like, let's put it in the middle. We got to do something.
So with that, because I feel like also with the social culture, I think a lot of what we went through and what we did laid the foundation for even on the LGBT scene, like the houses, the Vogue houses, and different and those different things in terms of these different things and people battling. I don't know if you remember the battle between G2000 ambassadors at the Taste of Chicago.
That was there because we was all there. That was an epic day. We were just talking about that day.
And when on the last panel when they were talking about lowering crime rate through this and how the dance floor was our release, and if we had a beef, that's how we got through it, was battling each other. I lost my train of thought. Help me out. I lost my train of thought. Yeah, just the, again, I know Todd and I know all these people from different opposing, quote unquote, opposing crews, but we always had an understanding that we were all within the culture. So it was never a situation where a fight would break out amongst us. But because of it too, I started going on the West Side because of them. For me, house, if it wasn't for this house culture, I wouldn't have not have traveled throughout the city the way I did. Because I was going, my mom had no idea that I was all the way at Rest Hall getting chased, coming from parties on the West Side, or hanging in Maywood, or hanging up north with skinheads, and just that whole sort of thing. Yeah.
You know what, but just wanted to make sure I clear one thing up, because when you opened this up, you associated me also with the Dim Dare crew, the Acid Heads, Ambassadors. I will admit, I was really around a lot of stuff. Our generation, we was completely immersed in house culture. It's just what we knew by default. It was not really a discovery thing. But I wasn't responsible for the creation of Dim Dare. But Dim Dare was started because of the situation and stuff that, I was in the middle of. And that's when the Acid Heads pretty much dissipated. So I was not, a part of Dim Dare.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah,
this is great.
You remember the battle though? Who won the battle?
That's a his one.
Ambassadors won the battle. That's when people used to dance, man. Like that's what I miss. That's why I watch dancers videos now. I'll click on YouTube just to see some people from around the world dance. That's what I miss. These people who go out to these lounges and clubs and everything now, they don't dance. You know how I know they don't dance? They look the same way going home as they did when they first came. That never happened. That never happened with us. That never happened with us.
With that, there was a quote that I love from Dr. Wallace Best that he wrote in the Huffington Post when he was talking about, I want to say it was the Tamir Rice situation in Cleveland, I think it was. Mm-hmm. And his one line he said in there, he said, "Black bodies in motion are never without consequence." And I always take that and think about the freedom that we had on the dance floor and the space that we needed, and because of us as kids in our neighborhoods feeling like, you know, if we don't have that kind of freedom to move, and that freedom, you know, even as it stands, I remember dressing sometimes, we used to be so out there that we used to want to wait until we got closer to the party before we really put on what we were going to put on, because our parents were concerned about us looking crazy as hell in the streets. And, you know, someone, again, like I said, getting jumped, coming, trying to walk through the icky, trying to get to the parties and things of that nature. So for you, was that floor even about that more of that freedom, that you're in a space where nothing is policing you?
Well, it was absolutely that. I felt like during those years and that time and every time that I go to a party and what I expect, it was the only thing that I could do that allowed the animal out of me, you know, or the demon and stuff. Even so, when I would go home at night, my situation was the opposite of what I was experiencing at the parties and stuff, the living conditions that I was going through, just everything that was a part of how I personally came up with in my story and stuff. It was a relief for me, you know, to go to those parties and stuff. And I had a lot of rage. And during those years when we were teenagers, those are the years that we all have the most energy and that we actually, we dance the most. We want to move around, you know, we want to discover. And that's exactly what we were doing. You know, I'm listening to Sucker MC and LL Cool J on the train. On the way to the party to hear is Dub, is House, Ministry, Thieves, Liars, Nitsa Ebb, you know, and slam dance the entire night and not leave until, you know, the shit was over, you know. Remember the police used to walk in the reactor and stuff, and we turn off the music, everybody sit on the floor like we were just there just visiting there. On the dirty floor with skids smelling like fish on the second floor, you know.
Yeah, that's when the police had discovered that the club was there and was trying to force him to go to, because the reactor used to be open to 8 or 10 in the morning. And so he used to have to kind of man and play whenever the police show up. He kind of used to have to. That drove me crazy because I couldn't stand
it either. I couldn't stand it either.
You know what? I feel like that's what's missing right now. You know, in it, and it don't really let us let the animal out. You know, too much. There is still a lot of stuff. You know, where you can go and do that, but something is transforming in the music, I think. You know, we're just not getting that anymore. And then two, we are a lot older. Well, for me, I think it's all still here, but it's becoming, to me, sometimes segmented again. In terms of the music, I kind of hate the way we've allowed like a source like TrackSource, which is the predominant, you know, website where most DJs now buy their music in terms of dance music, and how TrackSource has these subgenres: soulful house, Afro house, right, tech house, and so on and so forth. And then a lot of the DJs will go on this site and only pull from that one genre, when house was created from every genre. It's a gumbo.
You know what I'm saying? And so I think that's the part we kind of get back to. First of all, I mean, you don't have it to where it's not like so many house DJs have residencies now, for one. So, which is hard to make it for a DJ, because you remember the DJ used to break the music. You know, you don't have that where that dynamic can really happen, because it's like, again, we existed in so many borrowed spaces that there's not that one space where this is happening, or it's not a couple of spaces where this is happening, where we know every week we're going to get this kind of experience. So And I can't necessarily say that it's our fault.
No, I think everything is gonna. It was just meant to happen the way it happened. The same thing happened with hip hop, and plus, once it began to expand globally, we can only expect for it to transform, and that's okay, but that's why I asked the question: what do we believe, as being Chicagoans and the pioneers of this, that it should actually going forward in the future and stuff in regards to the music? That's why I asked that question. Like usually often.
Mm-hmm.
I want to hear more of the music that I fell in love with that made me want to go to parties. And I think that's going to be the same thing that's going to draw young people back into it, start new crews,
Yeah, so I mean, the question is, again, our cruise is what bonded us as friends. I've known both of you for
Right.
30 years or so. How do we get that to a younger generation now? I mean, I do see certain things happening, like with Ray Charnay and Party Noir, and certain millennials that are really trying to forge their own way. I also see this done without, they're forging their own way, despite what our generation is doing, and not because of the help of our generation, which to me has to end, because we have to be able to communicate with the younger generation, to have this dynamic. You can't it can't exist without going into the future with them, but then it also can't last if the foundation is not there either. So it's like we have to have some sort of dialogue between, and that's the part where I'm trying to get to, like, how do what we did as social clubs, what do we do, how do we now get that to translate to something to bring, again, like you said, the ambassadors, y'all was starting this because y'all want to go to high schools.
Right.
How do you see a way that can happen again?
Not really. We live in a different age and a different time, and people get their information from different resources right now. It's almost instantaneous. Now, if you think about it, the youth, here in Chicago, very much are still attached to house music, and they still have dance crews and the whole nine. It's just not the disco that we grew up with. When you've got brothers like Traxman doing what they do, and he's a living testament of these dance crews and these kids still actually being rooted.
Footwork Kings and all of them, like Footwork Kings.
Yeah,
and all
so it's probably about us actually embracing, the parts of the culture that, we've kind of been so resistant to embrace because it's still prevalent, and how to bridge the two. We probably should start playing more of their music, in our sets, the way that we want to. They'll listen. They're already listening because they're listening to what we as their parents, are listening to, and they listen to Footworks. We are probably the ones that need to open up a little bit more.
Yeah.
I would say get the coolest kid that has stuff going on in these high schools and talk to them about what they like. Like if there's a kid that's on this house situation, you know what I'm saying? Like find out what them and their people are listening to. Because I'll tell you this, there were grammar school parties, there were, besides Mendel, there was Hales Franciscan, there was Leo, there was Academy Our Lady, there was Unity. All these Catholic schools had parties. And I don't know if that had to do with the archdiocese or what, but that's a whole political thing.
That would have been a question for Kirk Townsend.
But if they did give, all of the little grammar schools even had Lee Kerb, which is a friend of my family. I call him Uncle Lee Kerb. He used to DJ, and he not only DJ grown folks parties, he would DJ kiddie parties. So I don't see a lot of people doing. I think the whole reason I gravitated towards parties is because I had a kiddie disco. They played good music at the skating rink. They had all these things. Good music was played on the radio. We had the whole hot mix thing. And then as I was in high school, in the grammar school and high school, I always had some place to go. And I don't think these kids have a lot of places to go. You know what I'm saying? Whether it was the soda shop in Hyde Park, or, you know what I'm saying? It was always something for us to do. Always. Ain't nothing, but that's why they out here falling for the okie doke. You know what I'm saying?
Well, you know something?
Because it ain't nothing to do.
You know, son, we were lucky, you know, and I say this and respectfully, when the older generation, or some may say the first generation, they got older, you know, and they had to go on and live their lives from like 85. But during those years, you know, not only was I going to like Jody's presser crib in the basement, we was jacking and stuff, you know. I hate when I lose my point. I drink too much water.
But it was always something to do.
But you know what? From 1985 through what, 88, consistently, every 2 weeks, and I have to say, you know, this is probably the parties that have just indoctrinated me. Lil Louis, the hotel parties, period. And when he was doing those Diamond Corp, you know, the girls followed, so I followed, you know. And that's when the majority and the bulk of everybody else that was not listening to college prep music, electronic music, or whatever, house music, you know, they started wearing Tretorns, parachute pants, cheeseburgers, you know what I mean? Polo shirts, you know, paisley shirts, and he was going to the parties. Every 2 weeks, I had some place to go. I worked a job, I saved my money, I never wore the same outfit twice. You know, I went from, you know, wearing stuff like the suits and the Zodiac shoes, going to the 99th floor, to army boots and the anarchy shirts and the Jesus medallions on my neck and everything, and the wild afros. You know, that was the reactive powerhouse days, kings and queens.
Can we talk about like fashion for a second? Would we get away with anything we were wearing now?
Yeah, I
we
still
get away
do.
with it?
I still do. So.
You said, I still
You know
do.
what? We never stop.
But yeah, I mean, again, like I said, with house culture, that was undeniably a look. When you saw a person just walk in the room, you knew.
K-Swiss,
Already
Tretorns.
knew.
So a friend of ours would talk about how she would, you know, people would mistakenly think that she's looking at a man's crotch, so she's actually trying to check and see if there's a Jabot tag. Because, you know, Jabot was a symbol of like, oh yeah, that's you know, that's one of our people. Well, of course that changed at some point, but yeah, so I mean, again, with that, there was several parts of the culture: the dance floor, the fashion, the DJ. You know what I'm saying? These was what created the culture.
It was infectious too, man.
Yeah, it was so infectious to the point that some people still to this day haven't come out of it. And holding on to certain eras because it was just such a bubbling time where, first of all, you have, you know, teenagers at the helm of something. You know what I'm saying? You have teenagers whose family was able to get them drum machines and create music. You know what I mean? And things of that nature. And of course you still see that now with like people making beats and things of that nature. But this was the beginning of all of that. So, you know, it was such a, I don't even know what the word I'm saying, because so many things happened for me throughout those years, from you know, promoting for Diamond Corp, promoting for Gucci Promotions, and for, you know, the Bismarck and the Hyde Park Record Ball Club, and, you know, just all of that stuff, to now. It's to the point that by the time I met y'all, people thought I was way older than I was because I had been on the scene for so long.
Been around it, you did it.
You know, and the whole, I didn't no longer have to carry nobody's crates of records to get in and all that kind of thing. But, you know, just the finding our tribe and the finding our, and in doing so, creating a whole new vibration, you know, that I'm just wondering what we can do to kind of get back. Not so much get back because you don't want to go back to a place, but you want to create a new, but still have a vibrant thing.
We definitely could be more engaging too. That's why I always try to talk to, especially young girls. You know, if I'm at a club or at a house night, on the rare chances that I'm outside or in town these days, but I always try to cuff like a young girl. They'll hear me talking about some stuff, they'll gravitate towards me, I drop some gems on them, you know what I'm saying? And that's where it starts. If we need more rec centers probably, where there can be an outlet, like more socials, maybe day parties for young folks from like 17 to fucking 25. You know what I'm saying? Like, you know, well, I don't know. I shouldn't say 17, 25 in this climate, should I? But you know what I mean. Maybe you could do it like Medusa's used to do it. Have it 18 and up after like 10 o'clock or whatever. But the early party goes from like 6 to 10. You know what I'm saying? Like, I just think there needs to be more social outlets where people aren't so on their phone. Because believe me, in Europe, they partying. Everywhere else is partying except for right here.
And again, I want to stress that it's not
And
even just
the
about a
home-based-
party.
well,
For
yeah.
me, it was about, because again, through house culture, I cultured myself. I learned about other races. I learned about other sides of town. I learned about, certain clothes and designers and certain this, and it allowed me to travel, and culture myself because of the culture. And it's like, how do we get back to culturing? And because again, we all from different parts of the city.
Yes.
And as much as you hear about the segregation, that didn't happen to us. Because of this culture, we was able to go in any space on any given side of the corner of Chicago.
Well, that was why we were able to do
Yeah.
it.
We may actually have opinions about, different types of people like the gangbangers, but the house parties was the only place that you can go. Ain't none of that matter. It didn't matter if you was gay, transgender, gangbanger, or murderer. Who cared?
I mean, we were partying in Jeff Fort's spot, the fort.
Yeah,
you
Right.
know.
I just was talking about the fort. Yeah. Yep. At the fort. There was a party everywhere. And I just, not even if it's a party, but engage these young folks. Ask them where they're kicking it. If there's no avenue for them to kick, it ain't necessarily got to be just about the party, but these young folks ain't got no problem with, they don't have the hang-ups we did about race, first of all. They don't have them hang-ups. They don't have, you got skateboard culture and bike culture and even dance culture. Like, it's a little different than what we did, but nonetheless, you have these dancers out here that are kicking up dust. You know what I'm saying? And people go see them. So it may not be the way we did it, but if we could just keep our ear to the ground, if everybody can keep their ear to the ground.
Well, I think it's a
We
good
could
deal
come up
for
with
the
some
cats
solutions.
that's actually playing the music to maybe find somebody that's young and partner up with them and stuff that they like, that actually play music and do something different
Yup.
than what they doing, because it's the same way how some of the DJs that's doing anything now was mentored and stuff by some of the older DJs and stuff from back then.
I mean,
You
I
know,
had
and it
so
really
many
is a
for
chance
me
to
was,
actually-
mentors in this game for me throughout the years. And I feel blessed to be able to have the many mentors in this game that I have who were legends and veterans.
That's what I wanted to ask you, Dwayne. When you decided to, because you had them, God knows you had the records. Jesus, this man had so many records at the big house, at your mom and them house. Oh my God, it was records everywhere. So when did you get the bug to really do it and do it for us the very good way that you
I
do it?
fought DJing for a while because the scene on the DJ scene was so cutthroat at some point. And everybody had this thing of clamoring for spots and clamoring for this, and I would have played this way, and I would have did this way, and I would, you would get to the party and these people ain't there. It's like you're not there to have a good time. You sit there to critique another DJ's blends and a critique, so on and so forth. And then plus, I was a dancer, so my thing is I wanted to dance, but as I ate too many cheeseburgers. And got older, and metabolism wasn't as whatever. I started DJing. Actually, who gave me my first residency was Ron Trent. Ron Trent and Anthony Nicholson had a spot, the old CODs, up on Broadway. They ended up having it and turning it into Urban Sound Gallery. And so at that time, they gave me my first residency, but I was playing more of kind of acid jazz and lounge in that room, and then they were playing dance music in the big room. And even that night, I had a very popular DJ hating on me and had me removed from the tables because I wasn't playing disco. Right. So not knowing I heard everything he said, I just played along with it, like, okay, whatever, as long as I still get my money, you know, and everything. But I don't know, DJing for me, because I mean, at some point I just started listening to so many other, I've always listened to all kinds of music because I grew up in a musical family, that I was never confined to what the quote unquote classics of house or the quote unquote, you know, staples of house or anything that was. So I didn't mind playing something of another genre because that's what house was. You threw it out there. You know, if you talk to Robert Williams, he talked about how when he was out with Ron Hardy one day and they walked past Jazz Record Mart, and Ron was like, "Ooh, let's run in here real quick." And he was like, "Why? You ain't gonna find nothing for the club?" And then he was like, "Yeah, I am." And he went in there and he bought some blues records, he bought some jazz records, and he dropped that jab at the club, and folks lost their mind. He looking like, what? You know, but that's what it was. So
I always liked DJs that took chances.
Well, you want to know what?
saying?
Can I make sure I input this? I always felt like in regards to house music, for some reason, I talk to a lot of people, especially when I would travel and go places. People think that house music is a certain type of music, but from the way I got exposed to it, it's not a certain type of music. It's how a motherfucker's beating that music.
Yes.
Because it's pretty much is music from a lot of different genres, and I think that this is probably the best time to engage younger people because of the fact they actually are listening to a lot of different type of stuff that we wasn't listening to. And I know because my daughter and stuff, she put me on to some sick music and stuff. And with that same music, the way that you beat it, you know, it's a rap.
So I have a lot of friends that moved here from other cities whom thought the same thing, that house was a certain thing, and then they moved here, was like, oh. I have a friend who thought she didn't like house music until she moved here.
Right.
And went to a party and that groove got up under her skirt. And she's never been the same since, and now she doesn't even live here anymore. She will move back to her hometown, and she's still to this day fiending for that energy that she felt when she came here. They don't even realize, first of all, and so much of the world, they think the house is EDM.
Yeah.
You know, so they don't even know about, you know, there's so many entities in the scholastic world who still don't realize that Chicago was the birthplace. Because you even know in New York they just did a 40th anniversary of house, and I was like, well, how is New York counting 40 years of house? If you're counting 77, that means you're counting the Warehouse, which was here in Chicago. And even still, the Warehouse was the Warehouse before Frankie got here because he wasn't the first DJ there. So, but I'm not gonna go on that rant because that'd be a whole nother rant.
I think first of all, if we really want to engage these kids, we have to claim what this is. Like hip hop has its declarations and codes and everything. We have to do the same for house. You have to do the same thing. We got to know what it is as a culture, the fashion, the dance, the moves, everything like that, and engage in these shorties. But we got to know what it is, and I don't think that was ever fully defined. And if it is defined, it's not said like.
Well, so much of our culture was never defined because we were just in it. So much of our culture wasn't really documented because we were just in it.
Right, we were too busy being in it, yeah.
You know, which is why we're here.
Right.
Doing what we're doing now because we do need to document all of this because, you know, people don't really, even still, you know, they've been doing this mapping for a few years now, and even still people come to these events and look at the list and like, oh, but that club on so-and-so ain't up there. And it's like, every time you talk to somebody, there's 5 new spaces that we didn't.
Well, you want to know something? Even though if you think about the internet, it's supposed to make it easier for information to get to us, but this is one of the differences. When we used to walk out of school, on every single light pole was posters and stuff with parties.
Trust me, that was my job.
You got a flyer.
Or there was somebody like Lewis and his brothers passing out flyers.
Trust me, I was one of the ones that's
putting
those posters up.
And everybody is not on social
network. And we're not going to talk about the poster wars.
Right.
When knowing
Poster
exactly what
wars.
time that you had to get out before
you
the rest
rip
of the
some
promoters.
Shit down?
And if
that actually hurt us when it became illegal to do those.
Now, if there was ever a time in the house,
when that became illegal to put posters and stuff up, that hurt.
And if there was ever a time in the house that got ugly, was the poster wars. Everybody fighting for the same light poles at 95th Street.
Some people decorate their whole walls with them.
and catching somebody taking your poster down.
Oh yeah.
You know.
Get a beat down. Yeah.
So anyway, I want to actually open up the floor and see if anyone want to join the conversation, if anyone have questions or anything of that nature.
Yeah, let's talk about it.
See, me, it's kind of hard because I know a lot of people might see or hear me, and I want to add on to what you guys were saying. Me, I'll be 48 next year. I went to the music box, you know, for the first time, crazy experience. The music that I was hearing at that time, I really didn't like disco. I really didn't, for some crazy reason I didn't, until I got older, and of course you can play, I was born this way and I love it. But last year, as you pointed out, I was the MC for DJ Dion out there, and you know, and that wasn't taken away from the other side. This is not throwing shade, not taken away from the main stage with Louis Vega, great producer, great DJ. But what I've noticed was it was less people there, and where we were was with who was that? Dion, Paul Johnson, Ron Carroll, Beat the Box, Zarnell, and it was so many people, young and old, and people got mad at me because, you know, I'm quite of a controversial person. I pointed at the pink elephant in the room, and I said, you know what? Those were somebody like, ooh, house heads. I'm like, that's not house heads. That's people who love house music. 8 to 80, blind, crippled, and crazy. George Clinton said that. So that's what we need to do. We need to get back to culture. Culture. That's all it is. I'm done.
You know what I mean? I threw my party, but then I went to where I partied at. You know what I mean? And did that. So that gave me an exposure to a whole nother world. You know what I mean? At that age, I was like 17, 18. My brother was older. I used to get in under him. And then from there, I went to start making my own house music. I got a 12-inch out. And then from there, I've always been a creative person. So I'm a writer, I'm a poet, an actor, singer, dancer, all that. So once I quit DJing and making people dance, then that's when I became a dancer. You know what I mean? Now I want to be on the other side of the turntables. You know what I mean? So that's what I'm doing now. I'm on the other side. But at the same time, I'm an entertainment writer. I'm a freelance entertainment writer. I write for Indigo, Soul Train Brand, Chicago Defender, things of that sort. And now I'm an author. And so what I'm doing now is putting together a book about house called I Am a House. And that's where I'm going to interview people, the producers, dancers, singers, regular people, the patrons of house and things of that sort. And that's going to be my contribution as far as trying to document house into a tangible object. You know what I mean? So that's how I'm trying to contribute to keeping the history and the culture alive. And house saved my life, you know.
What I would say about that, though, is when you do interviews, is the one thing that I've noticed in a lot of things that people have been documenting is that no one talks to the dancers.
Right.
And no one talks to the crews.
Right.
Which was the thing. I've even noticed some photographers will go to events and only shoot the DJ. And it's like, you see these people on the dance floor, like going for blood on the dance floor. Like, why are you not documenting that? You can't have a movement without movement.
Right.
So keep that in mind when you're doing your book.
What a concept. That's so profound. You can't have a movement without movement. It's great. Like, and it's true.
So I hear what you're saying, but by the same token, like with anything, like with the DJs or any other piece, I'll give you a perfect example of what you're talking about. Take Dave Risque. He created something that is unique, well, not that unique, but unique to himself in the house community. And maybe that's why all the photographers do photograph him along with the DJs and other things as opposed to somebody else. You know, I've always been a stickler for what you create, you will get back. And if you create an image or, because, you know, it's all about marketing. It's all about again, making somebody buy your product over and over and over. So, I mean, I hear what you're saying, but by the same token, I've seen it happen with like Dave Risquet, where the photographers will go to him, they shoot him all the time. He's become like the poster boy for the chosen few and stuff like that. So, the ambassador, so, I think it's not that fair to just say, that they don't. I think I've seen it where they have done that with crews and dancers and stuff. If they had a unique enough product that draws those type of, things to them, just food for thought.
As far as the effect of the social cultural purpose house music has today, do you think it's the same, or has it gone to a different platform? What are your thoughts on that?
As far as social culture?
The social culture of house music. So how is that, like you talked about the purpose and those different groups, the acid heads and the ambassadors and things of that sort?
Well, you don't really have any of those crews anymore. You still have, I guess, DJ crews, if you will, like Excursions crew, like New Bane, like the Chosen Few, that all basically are crews and throw their parties. But even with those crews, the Attic and everybody kind of throw their own picnics and different things. Even with that, I do see where excursions parties, but excursions party will bring in from somebody from New Bang, or you know what I'm saying. I do feel like that there's still a camaraderie amongst all of it. Like everything is just not separate, segmented. We do all still get together under one umbrella. I don't know if that answered your question.
Yeah, and do you think it has the same movement or power it did back in the day?
No, I don't think it does.
It's just different to me. It's just different.
Can a
it's,
DJ
it's
get
not.
in?
It's not better or worse. It's just different. It's just way different.
DJ, get to the. I think it's. No, I'm going to answer that question. Sometimes I'm back here, nobody know who I am. But I think it's better because, like we are seeing the young folks who are affected by the gun violence in their schools, they're going to grow up and they'll become aldermen, mayors, governors, and they're going to make a change because they experienced that. We, as house people and who in that culture, we are now doctors, we are aldermen, we are not mayor yet, but those people have power and influences to make things better for them. That's the problem I see. It's for them, and it's not outward, I feel, towards the younger generation. Because if we think about Kurt Townsend in his place, in Mendel High School, it was kids' parties, right? But now, those who grew up in there, they're having adult parties. You know what I'm saying? So it's not so much as bringing them up in it, but they have the power. We should have the vision. There are a few that are, like Dave Mays, somebody brought him up. He's doing something with the children, but because he is able to go into the schools and to the colleges and do that, I think we have more power. We just need to give ourselves more credit for that and recognize that we have the power to do that. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you all so much. I have a million questions. I'll try to ask one. I've been working with Corky Tracksman Strong for about 10 years now, and making films with footwork dancers, different footwork crews across the city, and I think that's an important history just to keep in the room here, because I see what a lot of these young men, mostly, and women too, have done to kind of keep on this house legacy without a direct reference. It's not like there's a reason we haven't talked about it, but yet this is another generation of house music. So I just want to bring them up. And one thing I've been interested in footwork is the effect of the dancers on the music, so that the dancers actually end up making music themselves or changing the way that the music is presented. And I wonder if you all could talk about that a little bit, just in terms of what is dance's contribution to the music itself or to the culture. And then maybe also speak about why did the groups that y'all were a part of, why did it not continue to grow maybe more directly than we've been able to see?
No, I just wanted to input something. You just said something real magical for me. Yeah, the dancers began to make the music because that's exactly what happened with me. Because I wasn't hearing the stuff that I wanted to hear to make me dance. I started making my own music and I'm putting it out. And I think that's a good freaking idea, especially with Footworks. Thanks for saying that.
Much respect to Footwork.
For me, in terms of why the cruise didn't last, because we all got older. You know, we are human. So like you talked about, there were always some internal. I have been a part of so many crews. I was in Passion. I was, you know, with Diamond Corp, you know, promoted for Lewis, were promoting, which means we got dropped off to pass our flyers, and my payment was to get in the party free. You know, I went from that to G2000 to Mental Problem to Gaucho to, I was a part of so many crews, and then even on the beginning of like what they call the houses, I was even on that scene. So it was just always a situation of growing, moving along, evolving, and people not involving with me, or me going into it, something different, and you know, going in it with me, and internal issues. And you know, I remember us having a meeting one time with one of the crews I was in, and there was an argument about this very thing that you're mentioning, and why we're not taking this, why we're not looking at it from this turning into, we were looking at a house in our club, in our social club, being so much like an extension of our home or something like that, where the people in the organizations, my brother and sister, we never looked at it as an organization and a business. We never looked at it as that we had people involved. There were people in the crew who were fashion designers. We had people in the crew who legit to be professional dancers. We had people in the crew that had all these talents. Why aren't we turning this into a business? We were not thinking that way. We were just in it, having fun, doing what we do, being with our people. And then once people start going off to college, and yeah, you know, it just did its thing. You know, one of my friends, she used to wear this spider web on her face, the Black Widow.
God.
She's now in California. She's a deaconess. You know, so yeah, it's just one of those, we didn't even think that far in terms of it being this.
And I think that this discussion is the starting point, and I think that there has been a huge resurgence of the house community and the music community and the dance community and the arts community collectively becoming involved in terms of restructuring the city. I just think that we have to work a little bit harder of including the youth, and that's one thing we're not doing. If we can't have a sock hop at a public school for whatever they're on, and that's a whole nother conversation altogether, because I'm anti-public school, even though I'm a product of public school. There are social organizations. There's the Park District. You know, there's the park. You know, there are all these other open spaces that would be willing to facilitate a movement of this kind, and it's needed. We have grant writers, we have professors, we have creatives, and we have movement builders who have the skills to make that happen. And we also have very talented young folks who are movement builders as well that we can include. So this is the start of a larger conversation. That's all I wanted to say.
I just want to piggyback off of one of the other things that I see. So I go to Chosen Few picnic, and we see, you know, the house that we grew up on, or you guys grew up on, you know. And then I go to the house music festival out Pilsen, and it's totally different. And I'm just like, and mind you, the host of that festival, or that puts that on, are young people who are in the younger age group of mine, or in mine, or, you know. And the people that they choose, even the older DJs that they choose to be a part of that, play the same house that they are exposed to and only know about. So the house music scene here, for it to be the birthplace, is like the epitome of Chicago in itself, just segregated. And that's another reason why people don't know. And I'm just like, another reason why people, a lot of our, the youth, or even in my age group, do not know much about, you know, the house music that was grown up on, that was started or whatever, is because a lot of people who are in the music are selfish. You're not in it for the people, so you don't care about passing it on. And those who are probably got hectic lives and don't know how to balance spirit with their work and say, hey, this is what I want to do. So with that being said, it's like, how, like, because I don't know if you noticed that, if you guys noticed that as well, but how can we merge that together? Because that's another reason why other people across the globe don't really know house like that. Like, the youth is only exposed to like what comes of EDM and electronic and stuff like that. Whereas middle age and up, or you guys or whatever, is like, okay, the how, like what started in disco and soulful or deep, or however the different genres, you know what I'm saying? So I mean, that's what I've seen, and that's
First things first, did you just call me middle age?
Middle age like a motherfucker. She was talking to y'all.
But no, so you said something, I think you answered your own question when you said spirit in music. And that's the part of it, is forgetting the spirit of it. And you know, that's what our connection was the spirit of it. And that's the part that we're talking about. I think, again, I can't speak for any organization. I can't speak for the Chosen Few. I can't speak for the West Side Fest or anybody and how they mold their thing and how they promote that thing. But you will definitely find that a lot of parties, a lot of events are always promoted to a target audience, which is the reason why there's a lot of times where someone like you talk about the Pilsen Fest, where it's not like some of the Southsiders didn't go because they didn't want to go. A lot of times they didn't even know, because it's a certain the event promoter, the event somebody is targeting a certain area, a certain target of people. And you have to remember too, the Chosen Few, that started out literally as Andre Hatch's family picnic, that eventually evolved into something, and a lot of the people that go there choose to use that weekend to be their reunions, their frat reunions, their high school reunions, things of that nature. So that's why that energy there is different as well. Everybody that goes to Chosen Few is not necessarily going there for the music. They're going there for the fellowship, for the reuniting that one day, 4th of July weekend So it's different variables. You're right. I mean, there's always been, I don't think Chicago, it's just, we've never been able to get past that, that segregation part. And to me, it mimics the Great Migration. And I'm watching it again now in Chicago, because we are grateful that there are an ample amount of parties on the South Side again. For a while, after a while, there weren't any. Once they start shutting down all of the 22nd and Michigan and all these different spaces, and Sawyer's and all these different spaces, we had no choice but to run to Red Dog.
We had to migrate.
We had to migrate, and now at the Great Migration, we can come back home to the South Side. So, which I kind of feel tripped out, because no one ever want to go to the West Side.
I do.
I've DJed some parties on the West Side, and I tried to get my South Siders to come to the West Side to hear me play, and it's like,
And the mic to our ambassador,
right.
Keith.
I'll go.
No.
I just got to stay more in the loop about
Not
it.
today.
When I came to Chicago 25 years ago, I was on the end cusp of when house music leveled off, according to what Celeste was talking about. I came on the second wave of Warehouse on Randolph Street, and Hotspot on Randolph. And my friend and I, we used to, after work, every other night, go out to these spots. And I'm like, whoa, this is nice. This reminds me of home. Oh my gosh, why do y'all end at 2, 3 o'clock in the morning? She said, well, it wasn't like that before. It used to be 5, 6, 7, 8.
Yeah.
9 o'clock in the morning. I was like, that's how it's at home. He says, well, politics, politics, politics. In New York, though, when I was in college, I experienced the underground till 8, 9, 10. So I actually thought that house was from New York, and I was corrected.
And we're glad someone corrected you.
Corrected, which brings me to the point that when I actually met Frankie Knuckles with my then boyfriend at the time, in the earlies of when the Chosen Few was behind the museum. And I was like, wow, this feels really, really good. And that same friend said, just imagine in the 80s and in the 70s what that was like all the time.
I mean, it was all the time to the point in my high school, like when the high school paper, when they would talk about the top 10 songs, it was never what was on the radio. It was house songs.
Okay.
So the list would be Let No Man Put Asunder, which they would call It's Not Over. You know, things of that nature. At some point, this was permeating all over the city. Our parties at high school, Andre Hatchett and Boo Williams and whoever used to DJ. It wasn't, we never, and that's why I have a hard time for me even to this day when they have like this whole New Jack Swing resurgence and this whole 90s and whatever. I mean, I came out of high school in the 80s, so we never partied to that stuff. We never did the Roger Rabbit and all that, you know, because when you went to your high school parties, it was still house music, no matter what.
So I have two quick questions, or two statements rather. So it's interesting that Chicago has now honored Frankie Knuckles. It took a long time
to honor him to pass away.
And then to kind of go back on the passion part of it, that the social clubs, to me, that's a driving force that transcends. I mean, yes, you have the DJs, but you have the masses of people. When you go to Trinidad Carnival, you have masses of people jumping, up, nonstop. This is the first time I've seen when you go to a party place, people are just dancing. I've been to other places, I'm like, people's just standing up like wallflower. You know, so I have to give you all credence.
And even there's a difference because I've noticed that, like, when I go to New York is known, people love to go to New York, and they say the parties are jumping and people just dancing. But I notice the dancers in New York dance, but they're not feeling the music. They're dancing because they know how to dance, and they want to show you they know how to dance. But we was at a party in New York this summer. They were there, because a lot of Chicagoans, we all went to New York the same weekend for a Jamiroquai concert. And just so happened, Anthony Nicholson, who's a DJ from Chicago, had a party. He was booked to do a party in Brooklyn that night. So after the concert, all these Chicagoans went to this party. We turned that damn party out.
Yes.
Because, again, you have these parties in New York where people dance, and if you see all this movement, and you see all this stuff, and their movement is, hip-hop informs their house. Even the DJs, like DJ Spinner, he was a hip-hop DJ first, so a lot of Rich Medina, all of them were hip-hop DJs, so hip-hop informs their house. Where us, house informs kind of everything we do, and it's in our movement, so we come in the door like, ooh, yo, and they didn't know what was going on. So I remember after the party, we sat outside, and all these people was like, oh my God, this was off the chain, like, is he coming back? Like, what? And I was like, oh, none of us live here. None of us live here. We all back on the plane tomorrow to take this energy back home with us. Y'all need to come.
Well, you got to understand, especially those of us who had after-school jobs and stuff like that, you know, as we started to go party and everything, or at school and at study, you did that all week. When some Thursdays, Friday, Saturday came, it was about what you was gonna wear, who's DJing, which party you gonna go to first.
Right.
Not which party or which one you gonna go to first.
Right.
And where you was gonna end up at, what the plan was. And you go kick it, and each
And listen, you want to talk about excitement. You don't know excitement until it was holiday, 4th of July or Thanksgiving, and there was a Bismarck or Medusa party that you had to get ready for.
And you got to
that
decide,
you
damn,
spent-
we got to go here early because it's going to be
now
crowded.
is the competition was how crazy, how outlandish, or how fly your outfit was going to be.
Exactly.
And you had to spend weeks getting this outfit together to stand out in line in the cold or whatever it is to this party and waiting on these epic moments. I remember at the Medusa party at Thanksgiving '88 when Lil Louis first played French Kiss. Man.
Oh, yeah. Blackout, War Games.
Standing on Medusa's stage, and I don't know if you remember, y'all remember how Medusa's was set up. From my point, did y'all remember in the Ten Commandments when after he freed them and they now was on to this new land and everything else, and they started doing the worship the golden calf thing, and there was this whole cascade of them just jumping and partying, and Moses came to the top of the mountain and looked down. I'm looking down, and this is the first thing that came to my mind was that scene, because it was just pandemonium. It was just absolutely pandemonium.
Yeah.
Just fly by the seat of your pants. But it was a moment. It was just like it would never happen again. You know, it was just so you talking about excitement, you know.
So, Chosen Few is exciting, but maybe I'm retro, but I miss that excitement.
I do too.
I do too.
I miss it.
Well, now my excitement has turned to other things. I'm gonna get excited for different things, concerts, art, you know.
Yeah.
I still have an excitement and a passion for it. It's just my excitement has turned to different things.
I got one question for you all. What do you love most about this thing that we call house? One thing. What do you love most about this culture of house? Whether it's the camaraderie, the love, the spirit, whatever. Individually, one thing that you love most about the culture of house.
Yeah, that's kind of a tough one, you know, that I have to pick one thing. You know, but if anything, because it's something that I can actually experience on my own and stuff, the love that I get from the crews and my family, you know, that they used to be crews, but now we like a church. But the music, man, when I'm by myself, man, I'm like cranking beats and stuff in my living room dancing, and there ain't gotta be nobody around. It really is the music, bro, that drives me. It makes me want to do a whole lot.
The freedom that the music gives. Like, I was always allowed to be free. And that was one of the, just being a part of this whole thing that was the first thing that taught me not to care. Don't throw the cares. I can be me completely, no matter what anybody says, and you know, free to like whatever was being played, especially if it was beat right. You know what I'm saying? Like the freedom of it all.
For me, the love. I mean, we've seen it where we were looking at that door, and the moment one person walk in, you like, you know what I'm saying? When we see each other, when we encounter each other, it's love. There's never a time that when you see somebody and it's like, what up? You know what I'm saying? Oh, what up, man? No, it's her. We love on each other hard.
Just like I came in dancing when I first got here. Oh, that's the norm back then.
You know what? I gotta agree with him. It is the love.
Yes, it's this love.
Hey, you know something? I gotta agree with you to love, because you know something, man. Every time I see any one of y'all, especially from the Powerhouse, the Reactor, it's like in my mind, I'm like pointing at you, like you were there. Rush. Acid hit, you know.
It's funny because it's almost, there's definitely some sort of sense of validation through it. And I think that's the one thing social clubs did for us. It was a sort of a validation of our presence, a validation of that our ideas, our thoughts, and everything were being heard and met with people who understand. You know what I'm saying? So, yeah. Okay, we didn't talk y'all head off.
Can I say one last thing? I just want to give a shout out to the people that's still doing stuff. The great brother Dwayne here, everybody who's making music and still going out, and the people who do small micro parties in the park in the summers. You know what I'm saying? Like that travel with their gear just to make sure that there's a good sound system where that can be played, and the chosen few people, and you know, just everybody that keeps this thing alive, man, because it's truly something to be treasured, and we have to do it. So I just want to shout out Craig Alexander.
All right, I want to give a quick shout out because when Todd first introed his thing and talked about the ambassador's inspiration, he was talking about wanting to be like Front Row. Well, Keith from Front Row, one of the leaders of Front Row, walked in late.
Yes.
So I want to give a shout out to Keith from Front Row.
Right on, man.
All right, y'all, I'm going to go on this other side of this wall and play a little music if y'all feel like dancing a little bit.
Listen, I always have been a dancer as well as a lyricist growing up, but it always has been in my living room or not in front of people. And then I go to Reggie's, you know, last summer, and then I hear him on the ones and twos, and it just broke my spirit free. And now people think I'm a dancer, and I'm like, you know, you thank the DJ, because they made me bring that out of myself, you know what I mean? So thank you guys. Keep doing what you're doing. I love y'all, okay?
All right.